Welcome everybody. Glad to see you today. I am going to be talking about Y chromosome testing, and this is just the basics. We could talk for hours about the Y chromosome, and we're not going to do that tonight. So we're just going to skim the surface is basically what I'm saying here. So we will try to do another session later on, maybe this year, where we go into more detail and get more intermediate and advanced. But right now, skimming the surface. All righty. So first, we're going to do a little bit of review. There are 3 different DNA tests available for genealogists. And I noticed in the comments that were coming in at the very beginning that maybe some of you had questions about which test does what. So we'll very briefly go over that. So the first one is the autosomal test. This is the one that most everybody's heard of. This is the one that Ancestry sells, that Family Tree DNA sells a version of this, 23andMe, and MyHeritage. So those are the 4 testing companies. And this is the one that's advertised on TV with the guy Kyle, who's saying, well, I thought I was German, but I turned out to be Scottish. You know, that's the test. That's the autosomal test. And the autosomal test is testing your 22 pair of autosomes. This is in your DNA sequence there. The test is available to men and to women, so anyone can take it. And you get your autosomal DNA 50% from your father and 50% from your mother. It reliably matches you up with descendants of your ancestors going back approximately 5 to 8 generations. So it's going to drop off after that just because you don't have measurable DNA from like a 9th great grandfather. It would be less than 1%, like a fraction of 1%. And it's not going to show up on this autosomal test. It's not that he isn't your 9th great grandfather. It's just that you don't necessarily have a big enough piece of his DNA to show up on this test. So like I said, it's offered by those different testing companies, and it's very popular. Something like upwards of 20 million people have taken an autosomal DNA test. The second type of DNA test is the Y-DNA test, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And it's unfortunately not as popular, and I really wish it were. I think less than 1 million men have taken this test. So think about that. 20 million plus have taken the autosomal test, but less than 1 million worldwide have taken the Y chromosome test. So this is testing the Y chromosome, and only men have a Y chromosome. So therefore, only men can take this test. Y chromosome is passed from father to son through that lineage. And it's virtually unchanged for hundreds of years. There may be a mutation here and there, but it's very much stable. And so that's why it can be used for genealogy purposes. It tests the male's direct paternal line, as I just kind of implicated. And it's only offered by the Family Tree DNA testing company of those 4 testing companies. And this is a reputable testing company. This is the one you should do if you want to take a Y chromosome test. And then the third type of DNA test is even less popular and less well-known. It's mitochondrial DNA, which is found in the mitochondria in the nucleus of your cell. It's available to men and women. So again, it's available to both genders, but it's passed down from your mother to her children. But she inherits it from her mother. And so it's passed direct maternal line. Women passing it on to their children and so on. Men do not pass it on. So my dad has his mother's mitochondrial DNA, but he did not pass it on to me. I have my mother's mitochondrial DNA. So my dad's mitochondrial DNA is going to die with him, basically. My grandma is already deceased. So I just had my dad take a mitochondrial DNA test because I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it, but I thought if it's going to die out with him, I want to get it done before he passes away. My dad's 88. So just got that done. He doesn't have any close matches, but he has a lot of more distant matches. Anyways, those are the 3 tests. So back to the Y chromosome. Oh, no, first of all, we're going to talk about the chromosomes themselves. This is just a quick visual of kind of what the chromosomes look like under a microscope. You can see chromosomes 1 through 22 are called autosomes, and those are what is primarily looked at when they look at the autosomal DNA for the autosomal DNA test. And you can see that for each chromosome, like 1, 2, 3, there's two copies, and you're getting one of those from dad and one of those from mom. And so that's how they say that you have 50% of each parent's DNA with an autosomal DNA test. Well, it's because they're in these pairs, and so you're getting one from mom and one from dad, totaling 50% from each person. Then you can see a pesky little chromosome 23 down there in the bottom right of our diagram. And this is called the sex chromosome. And the female sex chromosome, this will determine your gender, whether you are male or female. And the female sex chromosomes are shown there on the left, the bottom right on the left. And females have two X chromosomes, and they get one from mother and one from father. And if you're female, then that by definition means you have the two X chromosomes. So a male, which is in the bottom right of that diagram, he would have sex chromosomes X and Y. The X coming from his mother again, and the Y coming from the father. So that is what we're really going to focus on tonight is the Y. And so anyways, let's move on to basics of the Y chromosome. So why would you want to take this test? Well, for one thing, there's the whole idea of banking it, like I was talking about with the mitochondrial DNA. If your Y DNA is dying out, let's say your dad only has one son, your brother, and with that brother, the Y DNA is going to end because your brother doesn't have any children. Then you might want to. That might be a reason to bank his Y chromosome DNA just for the future, just in case you need it for something. Um, so you've got to kind of think about that when you're thinking about it. But there are lots of genealogical reasons why you would take a Y chromosome test as well. And this screen is showing some of those. So if you have a genealogical problem on the direct paternal line of the male who's going to get tested, such as a theory of who an ancestor might have been, or you have a brick wall ancestor on that male line. If you want to try to find men that you're related to back in the old country before your family immigrated to the US, keeping in mind that not many men from foreign countries are taking this test, but some are. If you want to know your deep ancestry, what tribe or people group did you come from thousands of years ago? And if you want to find your birth father, although I would suggest that you take an autosomal test first because it's much easier to find a birth father that way than taking the Y chromosome, but the Y chromosome test might be useful. So those are some reasons why you might want to take it. This is a diagram that Family Tree DNA has on their website. So like I said, they're the one testing company that offers this test. And they're just showing you here again that your Y chromosome is following up that male paternal line. That's what the blue line going up the left hand of the screen is. So the guy at the bottom is taking the test, and then it's showing his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather. And it tells you kind of what this test does. So this is Family Tree DNA's own slide. All right, now I know I saw the names of the people that are attending this session tonight, and there are a lot of women attending. And so you might be saying to yourself, well, what can I do? I'm a woman. I can't take a Y chromosome test. So women are going to have to get creative. Some of you more creative than others. So let's say you wanted to test your father's line and you're a woman, and obviously you don't have the Y chromosome. So you need to find someone in your father's line, your father's paternal line, who would share the same Y chromosome as your father. And this diagram, which you may or may not be able to see very well, I noticed that the red lines are not showing up very well. I'm sorry about that, but I'll try to explain it to you. You want to start with the female. So down there, let's say this is you, and you're wanting to get your father's Y chromosome for a Y chromosome test. So obviously, so you're going to follow the line up from yourself to your father. And if your father's alive, then you want to get him to take the test, obviously, if he's available to do so. If he's not, then who else in your father's family could take the test? Well, if your father had a son, your brother, then that would be another option if he's available, if he's alive, if he's willing to take it. Um, your brother has a son, that would be your nephew. He is also a possibility. He would have the same Y chromosome as your father. But if that doesn't work out, then you're going to have to go up the family tree again, one more generation. So you go up to your grandfather, and your grandfather's probably not with us anymore. If he is, great, get him to test. But if he's not, then you're thinking about other males that descend from your grandfather, and those would be your father's brothers, your uncles. So that an uncle would be a possibility. Your uncle's son, who would be your male first cousin, would be also an option. And that male first cousin's son would be your first cousin once removed. He also would be an option. Again, you go up the tree another generation to the great grandfather and to the second great grandfather and keep following it down again to try to find more potential males that would have the almost the exact same Y chromosome as your father would have. If you're looking for a male substitute, basically, to take it for you. So I hope that diagram helps you. Now, when you're ordering a test, here are the options that you can order from the Family Tree DNA website. They offer a 37 marker test. This is called an STR marker test. They also offer a 111 marker test. So those are basically your two options. 37 is a good introductory level test, and you can upgrade it later if you need to. It costs around $100, $125, and they do go on sale. Definitely at Christmas time, there will be a sale. There will also be a sale at Father's Day, which is coming right up. The 111 marker test is basically a better test as far as, you just kind of get that test and get it out of the way, and you won't have to worry about upgrading necessarily. But it's about $200 to $250. So, kind of looking at your price points and seeing what you can afford to do. The Big Y is the most advanced test that they offer. It is a $450 test. And I'm not going to be speaking about the Big Y tonight. That's advanced. We're trying to get the basics down. And so I'm not really recommending that you take that unless you are more of an expert. But it is available. And know that in the past, they offered a 25 marker and a 67 marker test. So you'll still see some of those in the system as your matches, but you can't buy those tests anymore. You can buy a 12, but I don't know why you would want to. It's not genealogically useful at all. So don't bother with a 12. Okay, I'm going to give you some definitions. I try not to be very scientific in any of my programs about DNA because I know the majority of us are not scientists and we don't care. We're genealogists and we want to know what this means to us and not scientific mumbo jumbo. And I apologize if that offends anybody who's a scientist out there. I'm not. So it's difficult for me to kind of get into the science and get really deep into it because I'm not a scientist. But you're going to hear some terms thrown around, so you should kind of know what they mean. Okay, STR markers. So STR stands for short tandem repeat. And basically, it means that a sequence of your DNA repeats over and over again, and they're counting up the repeats. And that is what your STR marker results actually are, is they're looking at fixed locations on the Y chromosome. They're counting up how many repeating sequences are found at each of those locations. And that is what the actual STR markers are. Your STR results are your results. After they perform that test, they look at how many repeats that they find on each section in each location on the Y chromosome that they test. That's what your STR results are. So just know that that's what that means. This is what it actually looks like. So in your account, when you log in and you're looking at your results, one of the options to look at your results is STR values or STR results. And so this is what it's going to show you when you pull that open. So this is showing you that at marker, so starting at the top, at marker DYS 393, so that's scientific. You don't need to worry about what that means, but that's just the name of the marker, the place on the Y chromosome that they tested. The value is 14. So that's your result on that marker. And so you read this across, and it's a sequence of numbers that needs to be kept in the right order. So this is for somebody who took a 37 STR marker test. This is their results showing what their value was on each place of the DNA that was tested. So that's what that means. You don't have to memorize this. It's always available to you. You can just log into your account and look at it again and see what it is. And no one's going to ask you, come up to you on the street and say, hey, what's your STR markers? I mean, that's just not going to happen. So don't be alarmed about, having to memorize these or know what the markers are or what markers have been tested. Yeah, no. Okay. So another fancy term you're going to hear is haplotype. Haplotype is just the term for the sequence of numbers that consists of your results. So this right here is this man's haplotype. So whoever's results these are, this is called his haplotype. So this is just his unique DNA signature, his unique DNA results. The way your matches are calculated is how closely their sequence matches with yours. So your matches are going to be compared against the STR values, and you're going to be a match if you have the exact same values or you have very close to the same values. That's how they calculate the matches. Okay, SNP. You might be tempted to say, oh, SNP. No, actually, it's pronounced SNP. I don't know why, but in genetic genealogy, the letters SNP is pronounced SNP. It stands for single nucleotide polymorphisms, and I may have mispronounced that. I'm sorry. It's more to do with your ancient ancestry, although they are getting it so that they're learning more about SNPs all the time, and they're finding out that they may be relevant to our genealogical time frame. But I'm not going to talk about SNPs in this lecture. So it's an advanced topic, so we're not going to talk about it. But the big Y is SNP testing. All right. So the two types of basic results that you're going to get when you get your Y-DNA results back that are useful for genealogists. So that's what we're going to talk about first. You're going to get a haplogroup and you're going to get your matches. So the haplogroup is more of an ancient ancestor information, and the matches are contemporary matches to other men who have taken the test. So the haplogroup is basically the name that they've come up with for the ancient tribe or group of men that your paternal ancestors belong to. And there would be a shared common ancestor, ancient, so thousands of years ago, who would be like the tribe leader of your tribe. And they determined this by looking at your DNA, both your SNP and your STR testing. This is what a haplogroup result looks like. And it will, I think, say ancestral origins on your test kit when you're in your account. I think that's going to say ancestral origins. And when you open that up, you'll get this screen. So in this particular person, whoever it is, their predicted haplogroup is I. So you can see it's I dash and then some more numbers and letters. So the I is your major haplogroup. So I, and then there's a lot of subgroups under I. And so M253 is one of the subgroups under I. So there'll be different subgroups, and some of the subgroups will be closely related to each other and others won't be. So we're going to be closely related to other M253s. But this particular group, it basically says that 23,000 years ago, so this is ancient, this is not in our genealogical time frame at all, the tester's paternal tribe was living in northern France or possibly Scandinavia, and they might have been Vikings. That's basically what it tells you. Lots of people get really into this. Other people are like, eh. And it's interesting. It definitely is interesting. Now, Family Tree DNA has done a map called migration map for each haplogroup. And so there'll be one of these for each one. You can see down at the bottom that there are actually A through T. There are that many haplogroups. And here's I, and this is the map for I. And so it's showing genetic Adam. This is not biblical Adam. This is genetic Adam that they found through doing DNA testing, who they're calling the first man, genetic wise. And he's down here in East Central Africa. And you can see the different haplogroups are moving off from him, like A, B, C, and D. And then this green one, which I think is F, goes up here into the Middle East. And I, which is the haplogroup that the person we were just looking at is, I springs off of that F group, I think, and goes up into Europe and up here into Scandinavia. You can see that. So this is just showing you, and again, it's, thousands of years ago, but it's just kind of interesting if you're interested in kind of human population and the development of human population and population growth and population movement over time. All right, the other part of your DNA results that you're probably really excited about are the matches. So this is what the match page looks like at Family Tree DNA. And when you're in your account, it'll say why DNA matches or something like that. So that's what you want to click on to get to this page. And it's going to show you your matches at the different levels of testing. So if you only took the 37 marker, it's going to show you your 37 marker matches. You could probably reduce it to 25 and 12, but you really wouldn't want to, because 37 is the level of testing that is starting to be genealogically useful. The 25 and the 12 are not so much. So this is showing, you can see up in the left-hand corner, it's showing you that this person took a 67 marker test. So these are his matches at 67 markers. The matches are all males who share a common direct paternal ancestor between approximately 50 and 500 years ago. So your son could be listed here. He would be, approximately 25, 30 years ago. Or your grandfather could be listed here if he took a DNA test. So these are other men that have taken the DNA test who are related to you in some fashion on that paternal line 50 to 500 years ago. So reading across the page this way, the kind of information that it's giving you on this match page is it's giving you genetic distance. This is how closely you match the person. This first guy, he's a 0 genetic distance, which means that he matches you exactly. There's no distance at all between you. Second guy, there's 1 distance. So that means that of his 67 markers, you have 1 difference. These 2s down here, they're 2 different from you, and so on and so forth. The name is listed here. I have just marked it out because in genetic genealogy, when you're presenting, it's an invasion of privacy. I don't have their permission to post their name, so I don't. So their names are under here. So I can see them when I log into my account. Also underneath that area that I blocked off is this toolbar right here. And I'm going to talk about that toolbar in a minute, so we'll get there. This is the earliest known paternal ancestor that this test taker has. So the first guy says his earliest known paternal ancestor is Robert Allen, born 1823, Jackson County, Tennessee. So this is gold. You know, we're all genealogists. So we know what to do with this. We get on Ancestry, or we get on Family Search, or we get on MyHeritage, or we go look at some books on Jackson County, Tennessee. We start researching out Robert Allen, right? He's the earliest known ancestor of the top match. So you can do that with all of these. And that's going to be part of what your strategy should be, working with your matches. The next thing that you can see here is the Y-DNA haplogroup. And this is, they should all be I, because that is the main haplogroup. They may have different subgroups going on. And you've got one guy down here who I think has taken a more advanced test or something. I don't know what's going on. I didn't investigate it, but you can have different subgroups under this, but you should all be I. Terminal SNP, we're not going to talk about that. That's advanced. And the testing date over, the matching date over here just means that this is when you were matched with this guy as a match. Okay, so let's go on and we're going to talk more about the genetic distance. So remember how I said that the reason that these people are your matches is because they have either the same exact STR values that you do, or they have, you know, just one or two or three numbers off. And so Family Tree DNA is going to determine that. So they do kind of computer matching, I believe. You know, they have a computer that's just going through and looking for and counting how many genetic distance there, how many genetic, I'm getting tongue tied. How much genetic distance is between you and the matches. And so that's all computerized. So they're going to compile the match list for you. You don't have to worry about that. So genetic distance, again, I want to clarify this because I've had people ask me this question before, and somebody might ask this question tonight. Am I more closely related to the guy that I have 0 genetic distance to? Not necessarily. I would say, remember back on that match page, let me go back up. These guys are all named Allen. And so they're all the same surname. I think they're probably all the same family. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. So yeah, you're related to all of them. And the genetic distance may or may not give you a clue as to which branch of that Allen family you're from, but you're related to all of them. So don't think that just because you're related more closely to the first guy because the genetic distance is 0, that he's somehow the guy you need to focus on. That's not really the case. You need to research all of them. Okay. This is from, if you go to the Family Tree DNA website, on their homepage, if you scroll down kind of at the middle of their homepage, you can search for a surname on their website. If you do that, if you search for the name Allen, for instance, you're going to come up with the public page of the Allen DNA project. And this is where you, the public, can see the Allen DNA results that have come in from the Allen project. And when you go into that website to the public page of the Allen project, you can see here are those same people that we were just looking at from the back end. We were looking at it from the DNA match page that only the account holder can see. But this is what the public can see. So they can see the kit number of the person who has submitted the test, but they don't see the name of the person. They see the earliest ancestor, they see the haplogroup, and then they see the STR values. And you can see here that they're highlighting the STR values that are different. So in this case, almost all of these Allens in this match group have a 14 in this, for this testing point, for this marker. But one guy has a 13. So he's shaded in, you know, a different color to kind of highlight that he's one off. So he's a genetic distance of 1 there because he's 1 distant from the rest of them that are 14. So that's just kind of, you can go and look at that on the Family Tree DNA website. All right. Now, I told you I would tell you about this. So this is the hidden information that you can see about each match. So back on the match page up here, it's hidden under this spot right here where I have names of the matches blurred out. This toolbar is under there. So for each one of your matches, you can see this. And so for each one of your matches, you can click on an envelope and see their email address. So you can write them. Now, keeping in mind that this type of testing has been going on for 20 years, and some of the early guys that took this test are now dead. So you can write them an email, but they're not going to answer you. And you can Google their name. You're going to have their name. It's in the account to see whether you can find out whether they have passed away. Maybe you can get a hold of their relatives. I don't know. The TIP stands for TIP, and it's a calculator of estimated relatedness. So you can look at that, and it will give you an estimate of how closely you're related to that person. Don't take it too seriously. It's an estimation, and it's very rough, but it could help you. The pencil, this is just a note field that you can put free. You can put any kind of information you want to in there, notes to yourself. The tree, this here is their family tree. So this means if this guy has put his family tree up. So that's, gold. Remember, we're genealogists. We get excited when we can snoop around in somebody else's tree and try to figure out how we're related to them. And this is telling you his level of testing. So this particular match has taken the highest level testing that you can take. He's taken the 111 test. He's taken the Big Y. He's taken the Big Kahuna test. He's also taken the Family Finder. That's what the FF stands for. That's the autosomal test that Family Tree DNA sells. So you can find this about each of your matches. So this is really good information here too. All right. So let's talk for a minute about one man's results. So my father is Donald Allen. And like I said before, he's 88. He took this test a number of years ago because I've been interested in DNA for a long time. But so let's look at Dad's results. So here's Dad's family tree first. Okay, so again, we're seeing Dad's whole tree here, but the red arrows are showing us his Y chromosome line. So the only line that the Y chromosome test for my dad is going to look at is these male Allens. So my grandma's on here, my paternal grandmother is on here, and the Y test is not going to look at these women and their families at all. So you got Dad here, you go up to my grandpa, you go up to his father, you go up to his father, you go up to his father, and you keep going. That's the line that you need to go to think that this test is going to help you with. And indeed, we had a genealogical question on my dad's paternal line, and that's why we wanted to take this test. So here's Dad's paternal genealogy. We can trace him back with certainty to his fourth great grandfather, who was named Isaac Allen. He was supposedly born in 1764 in Sussex County, New Jersey. And he died in Butler County, Ohio in 1849. He also made a stop in Pennsylvania before coming to Ohio. We did everything we could. We looked, this is back in the olden days, we looked at censuses on microfilm, and we looked in all the books that we could find. We made trips to Sussex County, New Jersey, to the place in Pennsylvania that they lived, to Butler County, Ohio. We researched all of his children exhaustively. We just, did everything that we could to try to identify this, his parents, to figure out what family he belonged to in Sussex County, New Jersey, so on and so forth. And when online sources came about, we looked at online sources as well. And we just kind of had reached a dead end. So our question would be, can DNA testing help? And yes, it can. And actually, two different kinds of DNA testing could potentially be useful. There's the autosomal testing. Remember I said autosomal goes back about 5 to 8 generations? And so this is my dad's fourth great grandfather. So it's kind of there on the edge of where autosomal testing could be helpful or it may not be. And in this case, we do have some matches to other Allens, but they don't know who their fifth great grandfather is either. So we found what we think are potential brothers and sisters of Isaac, but no father, um, no mother. So autosomal testing has been useful, but it didn't solve our question. So then there's the Y chromosome testing. So dad has taken the highest level of testing you can get, which is the big Y, because like I said, he's 88. He's not going to be here forever. And I just thought, I want to get that test. I don't know if it's going to be useful to me, but I've taken the big Y. So basically, it means that he has results at 37 markers, 67 markers, and 111 markers. I can look at his matches at those three levels. So we're going to do that. But first, we're going to look at his haplogroup. So that earlier haplogroup I was showing you is actually my dad's haplogroup. So the Vikings. My dad's not interested in genealogy. He's been very good sport over the years of taking these DNA tests for me. I'm very grateful. But it really doesn't move him. When I tell him about it, his eyes glaze over. He's kind of like, But when I told him that he might be a Viking, he was very excited. I thought he was going to go out and buy one of those hats, the Viking horn hats. And I was like, oh no. But he didn't. Although that reminds me, I might get him one for Christmas just because it would be a good joke at this point. But yeah, that's the only part that dad was interested in, even mildly, really. I suppose if I traced his family back to Europe, he might be slightly interested in like knowing what country we were from over there, but we haven't gotten there yet. Okay, so this is dad's ancient paternal origins, his haplogroup. And these are his STR results, which I also showed you before. So these are dad's actual values that that resulted from his testing. This is the 37 marker. I couldn't show the 111 because it would fill up my whole page and it'd be too tiny for you to read. So we're just looking at 37, but he does have matches. He does have marker results up to 111. So of his 37 marker results, he has 24 matches. Of those 24 matches, 12 of them are surnamed Allen. And then 12 of them are surnamed other names. So you might ask, what do we do with that? Well, I'm going to conclude from that, and I'm going to talk about this a little later in more detail, but I'm going to conclude from that Allen is his correct paternal surname, and that these other people are not as important to my search. We're going to concentrate on the Allens. Because here's one of the reasons why. His 12 non-Allen surname matches are all 12 different surnames. There's no agreement of, there's 5 Harrises or 2 Herricks or anything like that. They're all 12 different surnames, so men of different surname. So these are probably not relevant to our Allen search. We don't know that for sure. And if one of them contacts me, I'm going to talk with them and probably kindly say to them, well, what do you know about your family? You're matching with a bunch of people named Allen, and here's what we know about our Allens. Can you see any way that we could connect up? I would try to help them, but I would also kind of wonder to myself if they're really adopted, or if there's been some kind of incident in their family where they're not carrying the correct biological father's surname. Somewhere in the line, it could be 4 or 5 generations back, but we don't really know. But that would be my guess. But we don't know that for sure. We just really don't know. But I'm not gonna focus on them because I'm researching Allens, and I've gotten Allen matches, right? So here's some of dad's 67 marker matches. And at 67 markers, this is higher level testing. It's almost twice as many as 37. He has 12 matches, and 10 of those are Allens, and then there's 2 other surnames. But 7 of the guys that tested that had the different surnames at 37 markers, they didn't test at 67 markers. So we don't know whether they would have still matched dad at the higher level. And that's another thing I would say to them. If they contacted me, I would say, well, you need to upgrade to 60, you need to upgrade to 111 markers now to see whether you continue to match with the Allens or not. Because sometimes you can have a divergence where, at 67 markers, it looks like you're closely related, but then at 67, the one branch goes off and they're just, a different branch of a different bunch of a different family. So, and then at 111 markers, dad only has 3 matches and they're all Allens. We know that one of his 67 marker matches of a different surname has done the 111 test and he no longer matches us. So after 67 markers, his line branched off. So he's no longer a match with us, so we're not going to be worried about him. Okay, so what do you do with these matches when you have these matches of your same surname? So we're going to talk more about what to do when you get matches of your same surname, which is, of course, everybody's goal. The goal then would be to determine if you can figure out who the common paternal ancestor is that all of these matches have in common, right? Because you're trying to figure out how all those Allens are related to each other. And did this ancestor live within a genealogical time frame, which is basically 500 years ago, maybe 600 years ago, depending on the area of the world that they were living in at that time? And do records exist in that area to prove the connections? So strategies, number 1 is, remember how dad had 12 matches that were Allens at the 37 marker level. He should contact all of those people, or actually I should contact all of those people because he's not interested at all. Contact all those people. Some of them are going to reply, some of them are not. That's okay. Some of them have already put in their earliest known ancestor and their tree. So you can use those. You don't need to talk to those people. If they're not going to respond to you, you could just use their tree and figure out who they are and what their earliest known ancestor is and just work on it that way yourself. So you're going to be doing genealogical research. Maybe some of them will join you and help you. None of these Allens wanted to help me. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. A couple of them did. A couple of them didn't. But I basically did a lot of the work myself of trying to figure out how they were all related to each other. There is a surname group at Family Tree DNA. So there's an Allen surname group, and you can find this on Family Tree DNA's website. And I joined that. And so you want to join that, and you want to contact the project administrator and ask for help, especially if you're lost and you don't know what the heck's going on. Especially if you have confusing results, which we're going to talk about in a minute, because people do get confusing results. So back to Donald. So this is what his earliest known ancestors of his matches, what they said. So you've got a Robert Allen, you've got an Ananias Allen, an Israel, a Jonathan. The Sandy we're going to cross out. He's one of the guys from a different surname. 2 Zephaniah Allens and 1 Anthony Allen. So I did research on all these guys, is basically what I'm saying. And then can you connect them all in one tree? Maybe, maybe not. Who is the earliest ancestor of all the Allen matches? Could this be the head of our branch of the Allens? And don't take their word for it as the gospel. So if you find a questionable connection in one of their trees, do your own research on it. So for instance, this fellow up here that has Anthony Allen, I thought that was very questionable. At first I was like, oh wow, one of our matches is traced back to 1577. That's so exciting. And then I looked into it some more, and he did reply to me. He replied back to me. And I was asking him about it in a nice way. And but I was questioning him, and he didn't like that. He couldn't provide me with any data that proved what he was asserting here. He didn't have any documentation. He had some online trees. He had some people with the same names. But this Anthony Allen was living somewhere in England, and the rest of these people are all in the US. We have no link back to England yet that's been proven at all. So I think he was basically kind of just finding people of similar names and pushing them into his tree without having any real um, proof of it. So when I asked him about it, the whole thing kind of fell apart. He doesn't accept my belief that his whole theory has fallen apart, but I'm pretty sure his whole theory is not correct. So you've got to question it when something looks a little fishy, and come to your own conclusion. Um, so what did I find out after I researched all my dad's 1237 marker matches that were named Allen? I found out that most of them can trace back to one guy, and his name was Ananias Allen. There are several Ananiases, but this is the first Ananias that we've been able to find. Born around 1664, lived in 1690 in Somerset County, New Jersey. There's not a lot of records back that far, but this is what we've been able to find out. And the working theory is that he is the earliest known Allen in our lineage, and he may be the immigrant ancestor. There's a whisper about a father for him that was in New York City, which is north of Somerset County, New Jersey, at that time period. But I haven't been able to prove any of that. It's just kind of guesswork at this point. But he or his father is probably the immigrant ancestor, and all Allens in this group probably descend from him. So all those 12 matches that my dad had named Allen, I think all come from Ananias. So what are my next steps? And I've worked on this some on and off over the years. It's kind of a big project, especially since the other members of my group are not helping me with it. You can research Ananias once we found him in the US records. You can research him going forward to try to find a complete list of his descendants, or a pretty good list of his descendants. Um, this would be to try to place all of us matches on a tree, starting with Ananias at the top and going down like this. So getting back to my dad's line, remember how my dad's earliest known ancestor, Allen ancestor, was living in Sussex County, New Jersey. Well, did any of his known family go to Sussex County? Yes, actually. One of his grandsons, I believe, went to Sussex County, New Jersey. So that's my working theory, is that my Isaac is probably from that branch. We can research Ananias's origins. Can we try to track him to the old country? Well, the hint that I have about his father is that he and his father were in early New Jersey and possibly early New York at a time period when it was ruled by the Dutch. So um, he was living with a lot of Dutch people. He possibly, and there's several theories about it. One is that he is Dutch himself. The other theory is that he was an English man who was living among the Dutch and obviously had to associate with them because they were the prevalent group in the area. So with the name Allen, it's kind of questionable whether he's really Dutch. Of course, it could be Van Allen or some other like Dutch name that has been so changed and Anglicanized into an English version that maybe that's the reason why. But we don't really know yet what Ananias's origins were. We found a couple Ananias Allens in England. It's not a very common name. So when I find an Ananias Allen, I sit up and take notice and, jot it down for further reference, but we're not there yet. And that's mostly because I haven't had time to work on it. I've been doing too many other things, too many other interesting things. So this is what I ended up doing. So up here in the corner, it's very tiny now. These are the earliest known ancestors of my dad's matches, remember? So I have actually put them out on a tree here so you can see it. So here's the first Ananias. Ananias Jr., one of his sons went to North Carolina. So probably this Robert, who is from Tennessee, and this Jonathan from Kentucky are probably from the southern branch, because there's definitely a northern and a southern branch. William, the other son of Ananias, he seemed to stay in West Virginia mostly, or in New Jersey mostly. He had a son, Joshua, who did go to West Virginia. And Israel and Zephaniah, so these matches that are from Israel and Zephaniah, they are from this Joshua line. And then William also had another son that went to Sussex, New Jersey. And remember, that's where my Isaac was supposed to be from. So I'm putting Isaac tentatively down here on the George from Sussex, New Jersey line. So you can see I've accounted for all of these, my dad's matches here, where they would fall on the tree, starting with Ananias at the top and going down. And that's kind of what you need to do with your matches if you have surname matches, the same surname as yours. Okay, now we're going to get into your matches, and we're just going to skim the very surface of this. Basically, your results are unique to you, and your family story is unique to you. And so it's hard to generalize about your Y chromosome results. They can be very complicated, and they can be there can be subtle things going on that the general layperson might not notice, but an expert would notice. So if your results are puzzling and perplexing and they don't seem to make sense based on what you know about the family, you probably are going to need to get an expert to kind of give you a second opinion, tell you what they think is going on. So don't jump to any conclusions. Don't listen to this program tonight and then decide that you have figured out the whole thing, because I haven't looked at your individual results. I don't know what they say. So I'm giving you very broad generalizations that are not going to be true for every single case. So just keep that in mind. So you can get different outcomes. So here are some of the outcomes that you're going to get. Some people take this test and get 0 matches, like not one match. You can get matches of your own surname only. You can get matches of your surname and some people slipping in there from other surnames, like my dad did. You can get matches only to other surnames, meaning you don't get any matches of your own surname. So those are the kind of the options that you can get there. And like I said, I'm painting with a broad brush here, very general advice here. If I see your results, I might give you different advice. So remember that. So no matches at all. So first question I would ask maybe is, are your family recent immigrants to this country? And if you say to me, oh yeah, my father's family came over from Poland in 1910, I'm going to say, well, that's why, probably. Because your paternal line is still off in Poland. Most of them are still off in Poland, and Poland is not big on DNA testing. Yes, there are people in Europe that are DNA testing, but not in the large numbers that they do here in the US. So if you got recent immigrants, even 3 or 4 generations back, the immigration happened, you're going to have a smaller testing pool here in the US because you're really from a recent immigrant situation. Another option would be no other men from your paternal line have tested. So maybe there's a small number of men, and that leads us to point number 3, which is the line may be close to daughtering out. So what that means is, remember that the Y chromosome is only going down from father to son, father to son, father to son. So if your great grandfather had 10 daughters and 1 son, you're lucky to be here today, basically, because those daughters are not going to be carrying that Y chromosome at all. So that's daughtering out. So if there's an unusual number of lines that have daughtered out and other lines where the males that were born did not actually have sons to pass it on to, then there's going to be a smaller pool of men available to test for your line anywhere. And so if that happens, then you're going to have fewer matches, or maybe even not any at all. So those are some reasons. Those aren't the only reasons, but those are some reasons to kind of think of. Okay, let's say you get matches of your own surname plus matches of other surnames, like my dad did. So in my dad's case, remember, I just followed the Allen matches that we got, and I kind of disregarded those other guys. I would say that's in general what you should probably do, but here's 2 exceptions, and there probably are more. So remember, I'm being very broad here. One exception would be if your family story does include an adoption story or an some story about some child that was born, out of wedlock and was adopted by, or was, raised by his stepfather, or, was put in an orphanage, or, something like that, where there's definitely a question about your male paternal line. Then you might pay attention to some of those other matches. And another time might be if you notice that you have, 4 or 5, you have matches for your own surname, but then you have a group of men who are all of a different surname, but it's the same surname. So let's say my dad had Allen matches, and then he had 5 matches named Harris. And these Harris matches were 0 genetic distance to my dad. And so that indicates that, they are related to him somehow, perhaps. And so he might want to pay attention to those Harris matches and try to figure out at least their story, like where were they from, what was their paternal line story, what's been going on, why were they taking a Y chromosome test, were they hoping to learn something, just kind of dialoguing with them. But so those are 2 situations where you might want to look at those other surnames. Again, you're probably going to have an expert help you, maybe try to figure it out if it gets confusing and you know not clear cut what the test is telling you. Oh yeah, I've made a slide about it. So yeah, so basically, yeah, more research would have to be done if Donald's results had included matches of a number of matches of a different surname. Okay, let's say, and this is the one that gets people all the time, and I really want to put in a don't jump to conclusions all over the slide. So you have no matches of your surname, but you have matches with other surnames. This could be for a whole host of different reasons. You don't want to jump to the conclusion that it's because you were adopted, or your father was adopted, or there was an adoption somewhere in your line, or there was an illegitimate child somewhere in your line, or an affair, or a name change. You don't want to jump to that conclusion, but everybody wants to jump to that conclusion. So you're going to need more information about this before you can figure out why it is you have matches of these other surnames, but not your surname. One thing to do would be to take the autosomal DNA test, because you will see whether you're starting to match your dad's side of the family and your dad's side of the family or not on the autosomal test. But some of the reasons could be the same reasons I gave before. No men of your surname have tested yet. The line may be close to daughtering out, so there's just not that many men available to test. Or it could be because of an NPE, that's what they call it, a non-paternal event, where the last name is not reflecting who the biological father or the biological forefather was. But it could be something else you don't know. So this is my broad brush advice if that were to happen to you. In almost all cases of confusing matches, you need to talk to an expert. You can talk to your surname project administrator at Family Tree DNA and say, hey, can you look at my results and tell me what you think? And they will do that for you. Family Tree DNA may actually give you some guidance if you call them on the phone. Wait for more matches to come in. It's always a good idea to recruit men to test. So if you have 0 matches of your surname, I would start recruiting men like your first cousin or your second cousin, somebody like that, a third cousin, somebody that you maybe personally know who should have the same Y chromosome as you, and just see what happens. You may have to pay for this guy's test. I have paid for thousands of dollars of tests for other people. This is over a 20-year period, but I have paid for thousands of dollars of tests for other people. And if you want their DNA badly enough, you may have to offer to pay for it. So recruit other men to test, and then upgrade your results. So if you've only taken the 37 marker test, you need to upgrade to the 111. You will see if some of those other surnames kind of fall away, or if they're still there as matches at the 111 mark and at the 67 mark. And if you have confusing matches of another surname, you need at least one of them to also upgrade to 111. So you can see whether you still match him. So talking your Matches into upgrading is also a fun and exciting thing to try to do, and you may have to pay for that upgrade as well. Um, I did. I paid just last year. I paid for somebody, one of my dad's matches, to upgrade to the big Y, which was like a $300 test or 400. So it was an investment, but I really wanted him to upgrade, and he didn't want to. So, or he couldn't pay for it, I should say. So basically, those are kind of your next steps if you're confused by your matches and you have a situation where you're not matching with the people you think you should be, that type of thing. Um, all right. I think that is my last slide. So I think we're ready for the questions.